The Devil's Advocates radio show is broadcast under a time brokerage agreement between Devil Radio and Civic Media, Inc. Some portions of this program may be pre-recorded. Warning, you're about to listen to the greatest radio show ever. And due to contractual obligations and to shield our airwaves and corporate licensees from any semblance of liability, responsibility, and gullibility, we must tell you the views represented on this show are not necessarily those of this station or its management. This radio show contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening. Now live from the Civic Media Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning, welcome to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
And now, here's your hosts, Dom and Crute.
Welcome to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Halfway home, Dom. Wednesday, but I'm calling this the biggest loser hump day edition. Welcome to it, my friend.
Happy hump day to you, Crute. Nate, good to see you. Thank you for your hard work always. And our fair audience, welcome to the Devil's Advocates. It is a political party, and we're going to have a great show today.
You're a winner just for tuning in because we got some fine guests and we got some big headlines. First of all, SCOTUS tomorrow, the ballot eligibility challenge of Donald Trump, starting with Colorado. SCOTUS is taking it up. Oral arguments tomorrow, Dom. If Trump is blocked from being on the ballot, I think he's going to lose. So
I think so. A big loser.
We're going to invite, and in fact have invited, and he's accepted, such a gracious man, our friend, former U.S. Attorney James Entel, coming for the happy hour. Looking forward to that. We'll talk about the SCOTUS and many of the other legal cases surrounding the former president. Something of a loser, I would say, Don. But anyways, not James Entel, Trump. Also, new Marquette University Law School polling. It's out today. Dom, always love when the polling comes out because then we have the polling master, pollster extraordinaire, James, Charles Franklin. Why didn't I look at the notes? I know who's coming. Charles Franklin, pollster extraordinaire, Marquette University Law School poll. That's the gold standard we perceive. And I'll just give you the top line, folks. Here in the state of Wisconsin, within the margin of error, Biden's got like 2 points on Trump. Biden's up on Trump very narrowly. And I thought I saw, Dom, and we'll verify this with Charles Franklin, the least popular politician in the state of Wisconsin right now, I think at negative 32, Robin Vos, Speaker of the Assembly.
Yeah.
I will verify these numbers, Don, but I thought it was like 17% approve and like 49% disapprove.
And a big chunk of people don't know who he is or don't know enough about him to render an opinion, which is really shocking to me because the guy's the longest serving assembly speaker in the state of Wisconsin's history. You think you'd know who's at least partially responsible for some of the very bad governance we've been living under for the last 15 years.
Robin Vos, you might be the biggest loser. But Dom, I want to tell you, I'm on the road. It's the For the Love of Democracy Tour 2024. Thank you, Chad's Design Build. Chad Spade, our fine sponsor partner in this all spring and summer long endeavor. It's going through the conventions this summer, but right now I'm in Las Vegas. And Dom, I'm here to celebrate the glorious primary victory of President Joe Biden in Nevada last night. Ooh. Joe killed it, buddy.
He killed it.
Joe won. 89.3% of the vote Joe Biden pulled down in the Democratic presidential primary, and he had over 100,000 votes last I saw, Dom. And
I see New York Times reporting 98,358 votes, according to the Times.
I'm rounding up to 100,000.
All right.
Calling that 100,000. Because it makes a nice round number in my head. Joe had like 100,000 votes. Here in Las Vegas, you may not know this, but this city, and maybe it's the fact that it's on Pacific time, 2 hours behind the Central time, but this city runs a little later than most cities.
Yeah, you think?
I try to go out and get something to eat in Middleton after 8 o'clock. You can't do so, right? Well, I'm telling you from personal experience, very few restaurants open past 8 o'clock in Middleton on a Tuesday night. Not a problem here in Vegas.
Yeah.
I did find dining accommodations and all that stuff, Dom, but so many of the people must work in the service industry. The local news here is at 11 o'clock Pacific time. That's 1 o'clock a.m. Central time. I saw the news last night. I'm staying up waiting for the late results last night in Nevada. And I had to wait up till 1 o'clock in the morning because, I just traveled yesterday. I'm still on Central time in my brain and my body. So I was up till 1 a.m. just to get to the results. And it was a glorious victory for Joe Biden. Showed his strength here. You see Donald Trump pulling 89% anywhere yet? No.
Not yet. Crute, also, again, the Nevada Democratic primary, Joe Biden, 89.3%. None of these candidates, remember, you can go and vote for none of these candidates. In the Democratic primary, none of these candidates got just under 6% of the vote. And coming in third, Marianne Williamson, capturing 2.9% of the Democrats in Nevada.
A stronger showing than Dean Phillips. He was excluded from the ballot. Or was he on the ballot?
He was not on the ballot. Nope.
Well, then he got a 0.0.
0.0.
Much like Scott Walker. That was his final polling number before he left the race ingloriously, the former governor of the state of Wisconsin. But Dom, here's the other interesting part. The Republicans held a primary last night. And as I pointed out to you, only one notable candidate on the ballot, Nikki Haley. No real competition except from the line, none of these candidates. I mean, technically, you could go out and vote against Nikki Haley as none of these candidates. But who would get up off their couch on a Tuesday in Las Vegas where most people don't even start their workday till afternoon or evening? Who's going to go vote in a primary for none of the above? Well, Dom, about 44,000 people last night in Nevada voted none of these candidates. Technically, it's not none of the above. And Nikki Haley only got 21,199 votes. Again, we sourced the New York Times results because the late results in Nevada weren't final results at 1 a.m. They must have still been counting ballots, Tom. But Nikki Haley got doubled up, more than doubled, by none of these candidates. That makes Nikki Haley the night's biggest loser, Dom.
Well, I mean, but she is also the winner because none of these candidates, which is, especially on the Republican side, on the Republican primary, I absolutely endorse none of these candidates. I think none of these candidates is the best option for the GOP in Nevada. Again, Nikki Haley getting 30.5%, less than half of the 63.2% of none of these candidates. But coming up, even behind that, Crute, Mike Pence, 4%, Tim Scott, 1.4%. Of course, they've already suspended their campaigns, but they're still on the ballot in Nevada.
Well, those inconsequential figures, unless you're going to go hang the former, or perhaps the latter might be a Trump candidate for VP, not Pence, talking about Tim Scott. When questioned about his VP preferences, the two names Trump threw out very recently, Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina, and Kristi Noem, who I've mentioned a few times, who allegedly is the courtesan of his former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, according to many conservative media sites, but she's also the power brokering governor of the state of South Dakota. Pretty woman. Trump likes him that way. That'll offset all his weaknesses with the suburban women. Just a pretty VP candidate.
Brian. The total turnout, I thought this was an interesting number. On the Democratic side, on the Democratic primary side, 110,000 people on total turnout. For the GOP, their total turnout was just under 70,000. So many more people on the Democratic side turning out. And my understanding is Republicans can vote in both the GOP primary and then again in the caucus. So it will be interesting. I think what that total number is in the caucus ends up being will be interesting just to statistically compare, to see what kind of motivation there is between these different parties.
Well, again, I think that would be a hard side-by-side comparison because Donald Trump, who did not appear on the primary ballot, and the primary is run by state election officials here. So we can feel some confidence that at 1 o'clock in the morning when they started dropping these numbers with the local media, that these were coming from election officials. But this caucus tomorrow here in Nevada, Dom, and I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm in Las Vegas right now. I was here for the primary. And you wouldn't have known it was a primary. It was a very quiet day, and 100,000 people at the polls is not a huge number. But even less is the number of Republicans that showed a preference other than none of the above, none of these candidates, not Nikki Haley. So the biggest winner other than Joe Biden is probably Donald Trump last night. And he didn't even appear on the ballot. But the weakness that Nikki Haley showed in the fact that even though Trump had discouraged people from voting, had basically said, don't vote in the primary, go caucus, there were enough people that were still motivated to double up Nikki Haley with their preference for anybody else. So unless you're a never Trumper who's not going to vote for Nikki Haley and really have left yourself with no plausible options, this is the strength of Trump in Nevada. And we'll probably see that.
Maybe we'll see how many people actually show up in caucus for Donald Trump. I guess that's kind of my point. If these people voted for none of these candidates when Trump wasn't on that ballot, were they doing that because Trump wasn't on the ballot? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then when they go do it again, then they should go vote for Trump. Or they really don't like any of the candidates, including Trump, who was not on the candidate, and Trump's caucus numbers will not be as high as perhaps he thinks. That's going to have to play out. We'll know everything come Friday morning.
Well, Dom, I would just speculate because, I'm not all knowing, but I would speculate that first and foremost, Nikki Haley, she's stuck in this race because even though she might be performing poorly, there's a question about whether or not her opponent's even going to be on the ballot this fall eligible because he's got oral arguments before the Supreme Court tomorrow. She is ranting against the party. Oh, did we mention Ronna McDaniel, formerly Romney, though she dropped that, apparently thought that was a loser name. She's out at the RNC. Trump's already taken over his party, hadn't even won the election yet, haven't even caucused yet. But Nikki set a poor showing here in the state of Nevada. It hardly made it worth the trip, but I had a good time last night. Anyways, Don, we'll have more fun here in Nevada. I'm staying all week. And I realize this is Mickey, not Nikki, but, I butcher enough names here. Close enough for the Devil's Advocates. Crute live on the road from Vegas for the Love and Democracy Tour 2024.
DX.
Hey folks, Stephanie Miller here. As an enlightened progressive, you know how important it is to do business in accordance with your politics. That's why Solidarity Realty is my favorite real estate firm in Madison. Solidarity Realty is a local independent realty company that lives their values. They provide outstanding expertise and protect your best interests while building community and promoting sustainability and diversity. Viva la resistance! Find them today at solidarityrealty.com. And don't forget, tell them Stephanie Miller sent you.
Hey, Brad from Zero Res Madison here. What's the best way to clean your carpet? Well, not surprisingly, it's the same way you clean your clothes. You wouldn't clean a dirty shirt by running a white cloth over the top of it, nor would you try to get it clean by sprinkling chemicals and rubbing it in. For a real clean, you need hot water, agitation, and a cleaning agent, just like your laundry. For a fresh, healthy clean with no residue, call Zero Res Madison or schedule online. Zero Res, spell it forward or backward, it's the right way to clean.
Le who, the her.
The Devil's Advocates, making radio great again.
And we are back from the 420 break. Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. You can always join us at the political party at 844-967-2789.
Dom, I'm here in Nevada, Las Vegas specifically. The Nevada state primary happened yesterday. Joe Biden won on the Democratic side, going away about 90%, just short thereof. And Nikki Haley, 30%. None of the above got 63% here in the primary. Donald Trump wasn't on the ballot, so those that would be Trump supportive presumably, I'm guessing about 61 of the 63% were really voting for Trump. They weren't coming out to vote against Haley, Trump, Mike Pence, and Tim Scott, the available people to vote for, or you could choose none of these candidates. And 63% chose none of these candidates. And Dom, it was rigged because it didn't matter anyways. Technically, Nikki Haley can declare victory in the state of Nevada. She won the primary amongst those showing a preference for any of the candidates. She got 30% of the vote.
None of these candidates, although we love none of these candidates, cannot actually win. So yeah, Nikki Haley, last woman standing.
Sort of. Because the party here in the state of Nevada, the Republican Party specifically, they rigged the election. And they made a winner-takes-all delegate process here in a caucus that'll happen tomorrow night. And Donald Trump's team basically took over the state party and tipped the scales and thought a caucus would benefit the man. Because that takes real effort, Dom. It takes real effort to go out and caucus. You got to show up at a specific place at a specific time. Got to have your voter ID. No universal balloting like they have here in Nevada. Not in the rigged presidential primary GOP caucus that'll happen tomorrow night, Dom. And Nikki Haley, despite winning the state, here's the headline at the Raw story, one of my favorite sources. Nikki Haley slams her own party after being humiliated in Nevada. Well, that just sounds like sour grapes, but let me read. I want to get to a couple of her quotes because she is very candid here. She finished second to none of these candidates in the Nevada primary. Dom, just a side note, that makes her a loser. That is losing. But anyways, where Donald Trump was not listed on the ballot, Nikki Haley slammed her own party as chaotic. Yeah, it's their fault.
I agree with that.
Here's a quote. Republicans keep doing the same thing and getting the same result. Chaos. That's the definition of insanity, she wrote, saying the RNC imploded. The GOP House can't pass anything. We'll get to that soon, Dom. And Trump lost another court case and threw another temper tantrum. Dom, according to the New York Times, Jasmine Ulloa, Haley's rant is the latest break between Miss Haley and her party as she looks to take a more adversarial stance towards Donald Trump. Welcome to our world, Nikki.
Too little, too late, Nikki.
Yeah, a little too late. Despite her poor performance in Nevada, Haley will be named winner of the contest anyways, since only votes cast for the named candidates shall be counted. But according to Ulloa, the result denied her a much-needed symbolic victory. Miss Haley has continued to project confidence, saying that she will stay in the race until Super Tuesday on March 5th, but she remains far behind Mr. Trump in most state and national polls. In South Carolina, where she was governor and where the primary is being held on February 24th, she's trailing Trump by roughly 30 points. In California, Super Tuesday state, where she is set to appear at a rally today, she's down by more than 50. Woo. And Dom, as mentioned, I did request an interview with Governor Haley, or perhaps a surrogate from her campaign here in Nevada. And they claim they basically, not specifically to me, but more broadly, that they put zero resources and zero money in winning the state of Nevada. And I'm thinking, well, you should have. You could have had a moral victory. You could have had a media victory. You could have not been humiliated by this rigged process, but instead you were.
Or she knew the writing on the wall and knew this wasn't going to happen. And why spend the money when you're not going to get a return and there's zero chance to get any delegates? So, I mean, it's certainly a tough spot.
But she's rallying in California where she's down by 50 today and they aren't holding a primary for a month, Dom.
Oh,
explain the logic.
But it's close. Nevada's close to California. There's your logic, man. Come on. Let's see. The realclearpolling.com, a list of all the different polls out there, reporting Morning Consult today. The South Carolina Republican presidential primary has Trump up 37, not the 30 that you referenced in that New York Times piece from the Raw story. And I would also point out another thing. What Nikki Haley has been saying over the course of these last few contests. You know, she started in Iowa and was that, 20-some%, right? Surprised everyone is going to get 2 and I got 20. And I just want to do better. All I want to do is do better. Goes to New Hampshire, gets over 40%. All I want to do is do better. Then gets her ass handed to her in Nevada, falling back down. So I'm wondering what's the new spin?
It's the party's fault.
What's the new angle? But again, given all the headwinds that Donald Trump is facing politically, certainly personally, I mean, what's her downside for staying in the race?
Well, I don't think there is a downside for Nikki Haley. They're going to need a candidate, in case of emergency break glass kind of candidate. I mean, hell, the Supreme Court of the United States hearing oral arguments tomorrow whether or not Donald Trump should even qualify to be on the ballot. And while they could limit the scope just to the question of Colorado, so many state elections officials from around the nation are begging the Supreme Court for clarity. So first and foremost, if he's off the ballot, game over for Trump. You need Nikki Haley then. Suddenly she is your nominee,
right?
Because she's the only qualified candidate you've still got who hasn't yet suspended their campaign. So I know why she's staying in the race. How can you not want to stay in the race under that circumstance? And of course, Ronna McDaniel out. She's out at the RNC. Apparently she's going to stay in through South Carolina? Like another week and a half, something like that. Thank you for your service. They're way behind in the fundraising. They got a party in chaos. And here's the craziest thing, Dom. Donald Trump, I don't see how he survives the litigation against him, right? We've talked about this, whether it's dequalifying him or disqualifying him from the ballot, or the fact that he's a convicted felon between here and the election day, which would certainly undermine some of the enthusiasm, let's just say, for Trump's candidacy.
Yeah, I would think so.
All except the most MAGA Republicans. And we do have new polling out of the state of Wisconsin today. We'll bring Charles Franklin on in the Happier Happy Hour. It's coming about an hour from now, and we'll go inside the numbers with him. We'll see what the enthusiasm is. But right now in the state of Wisconsin, just speaking specifically to the Marquette polling, the enthusiasm for Trump is way higher than it is for Joe Biden. Those that love Trump's ass. That's their man. They'll go vote in a primary on a Tuesday in Nevada in the rain and cold weather when there's all kinds of stuff going on, like a Super Bowl this week, and they'll go vote none of these candidates just to give the middle finger to Nikki Haley. I got to admire that in some ways, shape, or form.
I don't know, man.
Those are some loyal people.
Trump loves the loyalty. I just don't know that it's going to continue with all the challenges that he has.
Dom, I've often heard you say the GOP is a party in disarray. Now you got some sources.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that on the other side. The House, the impeachment blunder. And Mike Johnson, it's not our fault.
No, it's not leadership.
Whose fault is it?
It's everybody else.
Refreshed, keeping you informed, entertained, and connected locally across the Civic Media Network.
How do we feel about Insane in the Brain for
sure
coming in next?
Cypress Hill? Yeah, we can do that.
That or a crazy song.
Insane in the membrane. Insane in the brain. Yeah, we can live with that.
I'm Terry Bell. Here's what Wisconsin needs.
Go to the bathroom.
Wildfires could be a problem in Wisconsin this spring. The Department of Natural Resources says warm weather and a lack of snow will likely make conditions dry this spring. The DNR says Wisconsin has already had one small wildfire. That was Saturday in Fairchild near Eau Claire. New farmers trying to get their operations started in Wisconsin are learning about leasing land. Kelly Wilfert is a farm management outreach specialist with the University of Wisconsin Extension.
Land is very expensive when you're competing against farmers who have assets already built up that they can leverage in order to afford that land.
Wilfert says leasing land allows new farmers to invest money in equipment. About a third of all farmland in Wisconsin is leased. I'm Terry Bell, Civic Media News. Now here's what you need to know closer to home.
For WMDX News, I'm Nate Wuggyhout. UW-Madison's Sigma Alpha Epsilon's annual Lilly Classic hockey tournament will go on this year despite concerns over the thickness of the ice on Lake Mendota. The event raises money for Lily's Fund, which supports epilepsy research at the university and regularly brings hundreds of people onto the ice. University officials say that the ice is not quite thick enough to support that many people and are urging people to use extreme caution when going onto the ice. The event will take place on the 17th. The State Department of Natural Resources is removing their fish consumption advisory from fish caught in Black Earth Creek in western Dane County. The DNR says that PFAS levels in the creek have dropped to low enough levels to warrant dropping that advisory. PFAS can be found in fish caught in waters with high PFAS concentrations and has been linked to birth defects and certain kinds of cancer. And that's what you need to know. I'm Nate Wuggyhout, WMDX News.
This is Chad Spate. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed by the hatred and misinformation that consumes our world, but I also know that we cannot build a house of justice and inclusion on a foundation of hatred and lies. We have to practice what we preach. At Chad's Design Build, we confront injustice the same way we confront a poorly built home, with love, compassion, intelligence, and persistence. We engage our community the way we engage our clients, with honesty and humility and the dogged determination that we can do better. Chad's Design Build, remodeling done well with love.
I'm Pete with the 60-second Showbiz Beat. Super Bowl week is one big party, and it seems like every year there is a high-profile DWI. This year is no different. Patrick Mahomes' father, Patrick Mahomes Sr., was arrested for DWI over the weekend in Texas. Mahomes Sr. was also cited for driving under the influence in 2018 and 2019 and actually served 40 days in jail. In 2021, Britt Reed, son of Chiefs coach Andy Reid, was driving drunk and severely injured a 5-year-old girl after hitting her family's car. Reed was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Speaking of the Super Bowl, FanDuel is re-editing a Super Bowl commercial that featured Carl Weathers, who recently passed away. The spot featured Weathers, a former NFL player turned actor, as an Apollo Creed-type character who coaches Rob Gronkowski. FanDuel says they are doing it out of respect for the family. For more showbiz fun, tune into Nightlife with me, Pete Schwaba, every night between 8 and 10 p.m. on the Civic Media Radio Network.
I'm meteorologist Brittany Merlot. Areas of fog and mostly cloudy today. It'll be a bit breezy with winds out of the south, pumping high temperatures into the mid-40s. Rain rolls in tomorrow and winds whip up to 35 miles per hour as the storm strikes, bringing even a potential for thunderstorms too. It's 43 degrees at our studios.
Your smile says a lot about you. It can give you confidence and give great first impressions. At West University Family Dentistry, Dr. Thacker and his staff will help ensure your oral health is in top shape, because oral health affects your overall health. From routine checkups to advanced treatments, they're here to keep your smile shining bright and to make your dental appointment as pleasant and stress-free as possible. Call West University Family Dentistry at 608-238-6244.
Don't forget about that audio we got.
238-6244.
Yeah, we're going to go there next.
WestUniversityFamilyDentistry.com. Whether you're hanging out on State Street or hanging out on the lakes, thanks.
I don't know if you know the Devil's Advocates, but the show is kind of a big deal.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show, Wednesday, Big Loser Edition. And I don't mean us. We're the winners here. You're all winners. You're listening to the winners. Winners. We get to do what we want. Here, I'm checking the text line. You know, you can use the Civic Media app to text us directly, and I get it on my phone, or you can use the traditional number to call or text 844-967-2789. But here are a couple of examples. Is Crute still in Vegas? Asked Jeff from Shorewood. Yes, I am. I'm right here at the MGM Grand Signature at 19th floor, looking out at the Sphere. And then he says, what a scam. None of the above wins the primary and Trump unopposed in a private caucus. I'm thinking he's there for hookers and blow. Jeff, I would say, don't forget the Super Bowl. One more here. Andrew from Verona texts in on the WMDX line. My interpretation of last night's Nevada results, the GOP is in disarray.
This is what I'm telling you.
You'd agree with that assessment, wouldn't you?
It's not just me, Crute, the reporting this morning. As I got up and it was still dark, I'd flip open the computer and open all my news tabs. It was overwhelming, the reporting on how much disarray the Republican Party is in.
What was the New York Times headline? I know you posted it. Let me see if I can find it quick. Dysfunction reigns in Congress as the GOP defeats multiply. And what was the quote you posted?
Taken together, the events that unfolded on Capitol Hill on Tuesday offered a vivid portrait of congressional disarray instigated by Republicans who are bent on opposing President Biden at every turn, but lack a large enough majority or the unity to work their will. It's not me, man. The New York Times is saying they're in disarray.
Let's give our audience a little reminder. Maybe they were, busy traveling to Vegas yesterday or something, Dom. But there was a House impeachment vote. And this was over the big border issue that apparently has unraveled the Senate bipartisan border deal dead, my understanding, but we'll see. But they are going to impeach the Department of Homeland Security chairman, a cabinet secretary, Joe Biden's, Alejandro Mayorkas, or at least that was the goal, Dom. Now, they didn't have a clear rationale or reason for impeaching the man other than not liking the open borders policies of Joe Biden.
No high crimes or misdemeanors, nothing impeachable. If you want to start impeaching people because you don't like the policies that they are enforcing, well, then it could become a problem in the future.
Well, we know they lost to George Santos, right? They haven't had the special election there yet. And Steve Scalise, the House whip, apparently he's out receiving some medical care. And there was some question about whether or not one of the Democrats, Green from Texas, I believe, whether or not he'd be able to attend. The Democrats, they played a little coy on this issue, Dom. So the Republicans did their math and they went to the floor and they lost. And Mike Gallagher, a congressman from the state of Wisconsin, was one of the dissenting votes. But let's get to some of the sound from the speaker, Dom. I think he captures the essence of all things wrong with this party.
Let's start with lots of comments on here. Let's start with the foreign aid cut. Number one, please, Nate.
We'll see what the Senate does. We're allowing the process to play out, and we'll handle it as it is sent over. I have made very clear that you have to address these issues on their own merits.
But it was my understanding the House killed the Israeli aid, right? The $17 billion?
Also
that
correct.
Was defeated by a House vote. That's what he's referencing, but please continue.
Let's hear some more. Speaker Johnson, democracy is messy. Cut two.
Last night was a setback, but democracy is messy. We live in a time of divided government. We have a razor-thin margin here, and every vote counts.
Yeah, divided government, but what about divided Republican Party? You guys couldn't legislate or govern your way out of a wet paper bag. You can't even get your own ducks in a row. But all it takes
is there more of Mega Mike, the speaker?
Steady hands. Yeah, three more. Let's play cut three, please.
We have steady hands at the wheel. We'll get through it. Everybody take a deep breath. It's a long game. We're going to get the job done.
Didn't we just go through Groundhog Day? Don't drive angry. Don't drive angry.
Thelma and Louise were steady at the wheel too. They went over the cliff.
That had a setting just outside of Vegas, didn't it?
But let's put the blame where it matters most. With all those bums in Congress, certainly not a reflection of the leadership. Cut four.
I don't think that this is a reflection on the leader. It's a reflection on the body itself and the place where we've come in this country. Look, the nation is divided. We lament that, right? The difference is the chasm between the two parties right now is wider than it's ever been.
If it's not the leader's fault, who decided to bring the vote? Well, it was you, Mega Mike. You're the speaker. You decide the flow of the traffic on the congressional floor, whether or not an impeachment vote, a historic once in 150-year impeachment of a cabinet secretary with no discernible evidence that would suggest high crimes or misdemeanors, but that didn't stop you. And, oh yeah, you also got to blame the Democrats because they were totally transparent about the health of one of their members, and they didn't expect to see him, and he showed up, and it's their fault.
Yeah,
they blame the Dems.
Hospital garb and a wheelchair to cast the vote. We'll get to some more of that. Final cut from Speaker Johnson. Cut five, please.
Sometimes when you're counting votes and people show up when they're not expected to be in the building, it changes the equation. But listen, we have a duty and a responsibility to take care of this issue. We have to hold the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security accountable.
You know, you act like it's a Super Bowl injury report and their lack of transparency about whether or not one of their members would be in the congressional chamber. This is very unethical by the Democrats, blocking our ridiculous and not founded upon any evidence impeachment charade, our kabuki theater, and you blocked it. How dare you?
We do have some sound from Hakeem Jeffries, but I want to throw out there a few paragraphs from the Washington Post. We talked about Congressman from Green Bay, Wisconsin, Mike Gallagher. Well, he was part of the problem if you listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Then we'll get to some Hakeem Jeffries. Just bear with me, folks. Moments before the vote to impeach Mayorkas on Tuesday evening, a chaotic scene unfolded on the House floor. And they're in disarray. Did you know? The vote had unexpectedly come to a tie after 3 Republican lawmakers bucked party lines to vote against the measure. 2 of the lawmakers had previously said publicly that they would not support the measure, citing lack of evidence that Mayorkas had committed high crimes and misdemeanors. But a third, Rep. Mike Gallagher from the great state of Wisconsin, had stayed mum about how he would vote hours after warning his GOP colleagues behind closed doors that impeaching the first cabinet secretary in 150 years would open Pandora's box. Gallagher ultimately voted no, which Republican leaders accepted since they could lose 3 votes to launch the first impeachment of the 118th Congress. But minutes later, the vote arrived at a 215 tie, an unexpected turn of events that stunned the House floor into a standstill. Soon, the Wisconsin Republican was swarmed on the House floor by his colleagues who engaged in an apparent last-ditch attempt to change his mind. Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has tried multiple times to force the House to expedite impeaching Mayorkas, was spotted shouting at Gallagher. She was soon joined by Rep. Mark Green, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, who spearheaded the investigation into Mayorkas. Another couple Republicans then tried to persuade Gallagher to flip his vote. He did not. As the vote stayed open after time had expired, Democrats shouted, "Order, order," in unison to bring the tied vote to a close. Gallagher stood listening with his arms folded across his chest as he intermittently gesticulated and shook his head. He was unmoved. He was unmoved, Crute. So this is what the Republicans are dealing with. Now, Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House, he has some comments on this issue as well. Let's play cut number 6, if you would, please, Nate. We should all work together.
This is a period of divided government, which means common sense dictates that in order to get things done on behalf of the American people, Democrats and Republicans should be working together.
Yes, that would make sense, especially in divided government. What do you think? What would it take for that to happen? Cut 7, please.
American people deserve more common sense, less chaos, less confusion, and less cult-like behavior.
I mean, well,
they want more cult-like behavior, Dom.
A few more from Jeffries, National Security Cut 8.
It's time to put the political stunts aside and to come together as Democrats and Republicans so we can support America's national security interests, our military readiness, along with our allies throughout the world, including Israel, Ukraine, and in the Indo-Pacific.
But you need willing partners on both sides, Michael. Jeffries also addressing some of these issues, not responsibility. Cut 9.
It's not our responsibility to let House Republicans know which members will or will not be present on the House floor on any other day or in connection with any given vote.
What's he referencing? The fact that they were silent about one of their congressional caucus, Green, Democrat, whether or not he was going to attend. And here is what Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say in response to this strategy that killed their efforts to impeach Mayorkas. We can basically look at this as a game, unfortunately, in their strategy. They hid one of their members waiting to the last minute, watching to see our votes, trying to throw us off on the numbers and we had versus the numbers they had. That was a strategy at play tonight. Yes, it was, ma'am. And you lost. You're a loser. Just like your party, just like your speaker, just like your, well, the list is long. I let you continue.
I mean, but, you know, the Democrats, they have a right to vote or not vote if someone comes in or doesn't come in. You know, Jeffrey said it. It's not their responsibility to lay down the numbers for the speaker. That's their job. You figure that out. If you think you got the vote.
He wasn't on the injury report.
Right. You think you got it, then you go for it. And you thought you had it, and you didn't, and you lost. That's why you're losers, because you lost. A few more from Jeffrey's. GOP, it's my way or the highway, Limp Bizkit style, cut 10.
The lesson from yesterday's continued chaos, dysfunction, and extremism is that the Republican my way or the highway approach is not going to work. Period. Full stop.
No, it's not, and it didn't, and it won't. Two more. Cut number 11, please. The strategy seems to be backfiring.
They want to use the border as an electoral issue in November, and that's going to backfire. The Republicans thought they set a border trap for Democrats, and they fell into it themselves.
I hate when I fall into my own bear trap,
no, Hakeem
or
Jeffrey,
donkey trap in this case.
minority leader in the House, the height of cynicism. Cut 12, please, Nate.
This is extraordinary. This is the height of cynicism. Once again, they are embracing chaos and walking away from common sense.
And getting nothing done except what? I mean, really, thankfully we have there's obviously lots of chaos in the world right now. You imagine if we had to rely on the House Republicans to actually get something done, if something terrible happened. I have absolutely no confidence that they can round up their own members to do anything to actually help this country. All they do is sycophant and do anything that Donald Trump wants them to do that is not serving the American people, and it's certainly not working out for them.
Well, Dom, keeping the government open is what got the last Republican Speaker of the House fired. Do you remember Kevin McCarthy?
Who? The new RNC chair?
Oh, that would be an interesting choice. Is he being mentioned? Is he being bantered?
I see some banter about that. The guy can raise money, and that's what you really need to do in that position. But who knows?
Ronna McDaniel apparently going to be out as the RNC chairperson. I can't imagine why. They've got such strength going into this election year.
Yeah.
Fat coffers and strong candidates, and so many legislative accomplishments to run on. Come back. We'll talk about whether or not this affects the RNC, the big party in Milwaukee, Dom, because, it's all about the party. 844-96-PARTY. Stick around.
I think I'm going crazy.
Partner now with the greatest radio show ever and start getting return on your investment immediately. The Devil's Advocates are a small business just like you, and like you, we can't afford advertising that offers no return. The Devil's Advocates listeners support our sponsors and the mission. Tell you when your messages are working and put cash in your register. So invest your ad dollars to reach our raving Madison and Dane County fans, or affordably reach the whole state, Chicago, Minneapolis, and our
We got one caller, Crute, Bill from Grant County.
Can be the voice of your business.
Okay.
Hold special events at your location. Interview your staff for satisfied customers to lift your business. Contact us today.
You want to take the caller and then maybe pivot to
That's true.
trash and
WI.com.
Connecting the dots between the left and the right. Rational Revolution with Chris Elfheim. Saturdays at 2.
we got
Sundays at
Reince
1.
Priebus and whatever on the RNC going forward at full speed ahead. That's what they said about the Titanic.
Coming back.
The Devil's Advocates know how to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and we're all out of bubblegum.
Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. Your calls, your thoughts, always welcome here at 844-967-2789.
Dominic, I am sporting the Summer Lovin' Tour 2021 t-shirt. This was the original tour, but I am on the For the Love of Democracy Tour 2024. I want to thank Hawk for sponsoring the last one, at least the t-shirts and the parties at the fine neighborhood bars around Madison and Hawks. But this year, we're doing the For the Love of Democracy Tour. Thank you to our fine sponsor, Chad's Design Build, Chad Spate and his crew. Thank you. And they've put me here in Las Vegas, Dom, because it's the most important place to be this week. You know, the Super Bowl aside, there is a primary and there is a caucus. And, you know, apparently there's a reason for me to be here beyond the blow in the hookers, despite the protestations that Jeff from Shorewood can't be here to indulge himself. I understand we might have callers that want to join us, Dom. 844-967-2789. It's a Big Loser Wednesday edition. But if you stick around, you're going to hear nothing but winners in the Happier Happy Hour. We've got our good friend, former U.S. Attorney James Santel. We'll talk about the imminent SCOTUS. You know, SCOTUS is going to hear oral arguments on whether or not Trump can remain on the ballot. That'll be at 5:05. Well, the oral arguments are tomorrow, but our experts joining us at 5:05, James Santel, and later in the Happier Happy Hour, Dom, Charles Franklin, pollster extraordinaire, Marquette University Law School poll. Will go inside the numbers. We'll get a snapshot of the Wisconsin electoral sentiment in real time. And of course, we'll take your calls, 844-967-2789.
We can get your sentiment right now. We will start with Bill from Grant County. Welcome, Bill. What do you got for us?
Hey, Bill.
Yeah, hey, how you guys doing?
Good.
I'm doing very well.
Good to hear from you, and I appreciate the monologue, my man. I see our man Slow Joe again on the news. He referenced to French President Mitterrand as
that's the best you got today, Bill.
Yes, yeah, I heard that, Bill.
That's much worse than accusing Nikki Haley of being Nancy Pelosi. I mean, you know, your guy kind of misspoke recently as well, Bill. Is this what we're going to do? Trade misspeaks between Biden and Trump until Election Day?
No, I'm not saying that, but just give me a little bit of chance here. Now, this guy is a leader of the so-called free world, and he's talking to a president who has been dead since 1996. Really? Come on, man.
I suspect he was speaking to Macron, not Mitterrand, because Macron is the current president. And I suspect that your guy wouldn't know who Mitterrand was.
Right. Now, Bill, to Crudy's point, and I appreciate, you know, we can all criticize misspeaks, but do you acknowledge that former President Trump has made similar comments, calling Nikki Haley Nancy Pelosi, saying he's running against Barack Obama and talking about World War II? Bill, I mean, do you recognize that Donald Trump has some of those same issues?
Well, I mean, being 78 years old, I'm sure he's got some issues as well. We all do, you know. But
speak for yourself, Bill. Teasing, I tease. Please continue.
He's not the current president, but he will be, and we'll all be better off.
Well, I don't know about that, Bill, but, you know, keep your fingers crossed. We appreciate you tuning in and hanging out with us. 844-967-2789. Joe from Madison, you're up. Welcome, Joe. What do you got for us?
Hey, Joe.
A pretty amazing day yesterday. I thought it was hysterical. And Bill, take a good long look at the Republicans' incredible debacle yesterday at not even being able to count the votes before their big old impeachment that they were going to do against Mayorkas.
Yeah.
I thought that was one of the most hysterical moments in Congress. The fact that they didn't even think about the fact that Green could leave the hospital. They didn't even bother to figure that out. They just assumed. And one of the things that Nancy Pelosi was always known for was counting the votes. You do not put your people on the floor unless you got it nailed down. And there was Speaker Johnson, asleep at the wheel, another Republican asleep at the wheel. And so you had this debacle of this, that was the Green deal made a debacle of that vote. And then you had the standalone vote where it was just Israel aid that was voted down. I mean, the guy, it was like nutball in order. And then I thought the fact that the most conservative immigration bill that we have had in decades, and the Republicans have killed it. It's amazing. They had gotten in that immigration bill what they wanted, and still they won't take it. They're talking about dropping all legal immigration, that's what they want to have. It's an amazing time. And here we are talking about whether Joe Biden mispronounced or Trump mispronounced somebody's name. Come on, people. We have things to figure out in terms of how our allies see us and what we're doing in terms of immigration. And this is what we're talking about, is whether Joe Biden or Trump are mispronouncing someone's names. I don't know. I find it kind of amazing. So my take on the subject. Thanks, guys.
If you appreciate your call, but if you stick around until our friend Charles Franklin, the Marquette University Law School poll, fresh off the presses, he'll go inside the numbers, and you'll be surprised, I think, as a Biden supportive, by how many Wisconsinites think that Joe Biden isn't up to the task. Like 61% of Wisconsinites say Joe's getting old, but only like 27% have the same perception of Trump. And they're very similar in age, and Trump is not exactly a rocket scientist when he's out there on the stump these days. He has slipped as well. So, Joe, I think you might be surprised. And I think that Bill, and we got a few messages in on the last caller, Bill, what's he smoking? I want some of that. Well, I can tell you that what Bill is espousing is also what many Wisconsinites believe. There is a sentiment that Donald Trump's going to win the state of Wisconsin, that Donald Trump's going to be reelected president, and it's shown in the Marquette University Law School numbers today. They are somewhat troubling if you go beyond the top line, which is Biden is beating Trump within the margin of error. But that's not a lot to hang your hat on when you see the enthusiasm gap. And most of Wisconsin, or at least a higher percentage, a plurality of Wisconsinites, think Trump's going to win the presidency.
Trump might not even be on the ballot, so we'll have to wait and see. And thank you for the call, Joe. And with reference to Speaker Johnson and the chaos and the disarray that Republicans are going through, I saw something on the social media today that it's really Nancy Pelosi's fault because she made it look so easy.
I was going to ask Joe, do you ever see Nancy Pelosi screw up a vote on anything, like didn't have the votes? Do you ever see her get embarrassed? Have a defeated impeachment vote against some Republican president? Because I don't recall that ever happening. She's much better than you will ever hope to be, Mega Mike Johnson. Devil's Advocate's getting better. We got James Santel, former U.S. attorney. Stick around. It's going to be a fun, happier happy hour.
This is Mad Radio 92.7 WMDX. Did you know this local radio station is part?
All right, let's test headphones first. Test 1, 2. How am I sounding to you?
You are sounding as crisp as a springtime day.
Not too loud or anything?
Not too loud at all. It sounds great, as a matter of fact.
Awesome. And your audio levels look good on my end.
Good.
And of course, the guys walk away as soon as...
Of course, that's what they do. You come, they invite you to dinner, and then they walk away at the end of the night, so that's the way it works. So good. No, it sounds incredibly crisp. Not to be at all critical of Waukesha, but I don't know that when sometimes I put the headphones on there and I think, am I hearing myself? Is that somebody else? So it's I like being here. I got to tell you,
that's good to hear. We were having some issues with those headphones the other day. So
really,
yeah. So that's a good thing to hear.
Right? Good. And I'm okay on the screen here. Just stand right here with stuff in front of me.
Yeah,
okay.
And you can adjust if you want to lean forward. Move that if you want. It's up to you. I think you look good on the screen on my end. So
good. All right, we got the Devils logo right in the back there. Great.
Got you right next to it.
Terrific.
I'm gonna grab some water. Head
Great,
to the bathroom.
Nate. We are set to go. Good.
I'll throw everyone's feedback on.
Okay. Saying that House Speaker Johnson and congressional Republicans
And your feed will be on as well.
Hey, great.
The latest ceasefire deal proposed by the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar was rejected by the Israeli Prime Minister, but Secretary of State Antony Blinken visiting Israel says all sides should keep working.
As we're defining the path forward, including the pathway to a Palestinian state.
U.S. officials say the commander of an Iran-backed militia was killed in a U.S. drone strike in Baghdad. They say he was among those responsible for attacks on U.S. forces in the region. This is ABC News.
This is your hometown radio, refreshed, keeping you informed, entertained, and connected locally across the Civic Media Network.
Civic Media News. I'm Terry Bell. Here's what Wisconsin needs to know. The universities of Wisconsin have a new website listing all online courses across the system's 13 campuses. The website lists more than 200 online programs and links to the campuses that offer them. The UW system is facing an $18 million deficit by this summer after years of declining enrollment and lower state aid. 4 two-year branch campuses are closing. A Republican bill aims to ban so-called loyalty oaths from Wisconsin state universities and technical colleges. The target is diversity, equity, and inclusion, but Democratic Representative Joni Emerson worries about unintended consequences.
Would this mean that we wouldn't be able to have any college Democrats, college Republican clubs, any sort of religious organization clubs?
The bill got a hearing yesterday. I'm Terry Bell, Civic Media News. Now here's what you need to know closer to home.
For WMDX News, I'm Nate Wiggyhout. Fitchburg officials have shared new information on a planned new police facility. The project has been almost a decade in the making and would have space for evidence processing and conference rooms. It would be located at the intersection of Fish Hatchery and Lacey Road in Fitchburg and would cost $49 million. It will go before the Fitchburg City Council for final approval on February 13th. Fort Atkinson is one of at least 8 area school districts going to referendum this April to raise their operational funds. Nathan Nitt is their director of business services. He says the money is needed for the day-to-day operations of running a school.
Salaries, it would be transportation costs, so our busing kids to and from school, technology, insurance costs, everything that goes into running the school district.
Fort Atkinson schools are asking for $6.5 million a year for the next 3 years. And that's what you need to know. I'm Nate Wiggyhout, WMDX News.
At Chance Design Build, we provide remodeling done well with love. Our commitments extend beyond our workplace and your home to support our community. We judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin, and we believe all humans deserve quality, publicly funded education, childcare, and health care. But what do you believe in? At Chance Design Build, we believe every person must have the opportunity to thrive. If you're thinking about remodeling your home, go to chancedesignbuild.com to learn more about our commitments to you, your home, and our community.
The Bucks lose to the Suns. Hi, I'm Mike Clemens with sports. The Bucks were shorthanded and lost to the Suns in Phoenix 114-106. Giannis played, but without Lillard, Middleton, and Brook Lopez. The Bucks are now 1-4 since they hired Doc Rivers to replace Adrian Griffin as head coach. Rivers blames part of that on the team's schedule.
You know, the Utah game, you kind of knew, altitude, back-to-back. I mean, whoever scheduled a Dallas, Utah, have never been on an airplane in their life, or no time zones. I guarantee you when they looked at that before the year started, they were like, this was going to be a brutal game for us. So it's probably all that.
The Bucks are back home tomorrow night against Minnesota. NFL, the Packers' new linebackers coach is Anthony Campanile, formerly of the Miami Dolphins. Meanwhile, the Dolphins have hired Joe Barry to replace him. And former Packers and Bears assistant coach Luke Getsy hired yesterday as the new offensive coordinator of the Las Vegas Raiders. With sports, I'm Mike Clemens.
I'm meteorologist Brittany Merlot. Areas of fog and mostly cloudy today. It'll be a bit breezy with winds out of the south, pumping high temperatures into the mid-40s. Rain rolls in tomorrow and winds whip up to 35 miles per hour as the storm strikes, bringing even a potential for thunderstorms too. Currently, it's 42.
Hey, Darcy, I just saw the perfect house. Can you help me write an offer on it?
I'd be happy to, Brian. Did you see it at an open house?
No, I just called the sign and had the agent show it to me. I didn't want to bug you.
Right. How many times have you heard me say don't call the sign?
All of them.
You called the agent working for the seller, and once you see the property with that agent, I'm no longer free to write an offer on it.
So
you need to hire us from the beginning, help you find the right home, negotiate on your behalf, and protect your interests all the way through the process, and it shouldn't cost you a dime.
Solidarity Realty. They're real, they're solid, and they're honest. Find them at solidarityrealty.com.
Hey everybody, it's Todd Alwald. Noon to 3 on Thursday. Our guest is Keegan Kelly from Crack.com. Obscure sitcoms right here on the Civic Media Radio Network.
There's nothing better than the vilest. The Devil's Advocates radio show is broadcast under a time brokerage agreement between Devil Radio and Civic Media, Inc. Some portions of this program may be pre-recorded. Warning, you are about to listen to the greatest radio show ever. And due to contractual obligations and to shield our airwaves and corporate licensees from any semblance of liability, responsibility, and gullibility, we must tell you the views represented on this show are not necessarily those of this station or its management. This radio show contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening. Now live from the Civic Media Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning, welcome to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
And now, here's your hosts, Dom and Crute.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates radio show, a big loser Wednesday edition. Happier, happy hour, but no losers here, only winners when you listen to us and our fine guest, guys like James Santel, who joins us right now in the seat I normally sit in the WDX 92.7 FM studios in Madison. Jim, welcome to the Devil's Advocates, man.
What a delight it is to be with you once again. And yes, you leave for a little while and I take over the property. That's what happens.
Hey, Jim, thanks for joining us, man.
Good.
Just don't think you're a squatter, Jim. I need that real estate back next week.
We'll see. We'll see.
I would like to mention I am here in Las Vegas. Nevada primary happened yesterday, Jim. And tomorrow a caucus, something of a rigged affair they're having in Nevada. But tomorrow, the U.S. Supreme Court to hear whether or not Trump should be on the ballot, specifically in the state of Colorado, where a lower court ruled he was an insurrectionist and he was removed from the ballot, or at least that was the initial ruling. But so many different people want to know, isn't Trump going to be on the ballot? Should he be on the ballot? This has got to be a national issue, not just a Colorado state issue, wouldn't you think, Jim? Let's start with the SCOTUS, the oral arguments they're supposed to hear tomorrow. What should the people know, Jim?
Absolutely. So it is tomorrow morning. It's a big case. It's one of about 60 or so on the docket of the Supreme Court, probably among the top 10 or so. And as you said so accurately, comes out of Colorado, the Supreme Court there saying a number of weeks ago that not only did Donald Trump engage in an insurrection, but he's also subject to not being on the ballot by virtue of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment that says if you're an insurrectionist, having previously taken an oath of office, you can't be on a ballot like that. And so that's the lower court ruling that is now before the Supreme Court. Lots and lots of things to be heard tomorrow. We've talked about this before. An awful lot of people, including me, believe that the Supreme Court will overturn the Colorado decision, put him back on the ballot. They've got so many different off-ramps, so to speak, to do it. And my sense is that they probably will give him this win in a time when he's otherwise going to be facing a lot of losing opinions coming up in the Supreme Court.
But Jim, my understanding is the Colorado Supreme Court used the ruling of Judge Neil Gorsuch to justify blocking Trump from the ballot. The supposed originalists that are the conservative bloc of this court, including Gorsuch, doesn't some of their prior rulings and some of their prior opinions, Jim, if they're sort of intellectually honest, and this is very important in this case, they'd be reversing themselves, would they not, sir?
Right. So this is when Neil Gorsuch is on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. He talks about states' rights and says, you know what? States should have the prerogative to make decisions about who's on the ballot and who isn't. And so you better anticipate that tomorrow those lawyers are going to say, Judge Gorsuch, at some point in your not too distant past, you basically said that Colorado can, in fact, remove people from a ballot. Don't go back in the opposite direction. That's one of many arguments, obviously, that's going to be made tomorrow. Lots and lots of things to be presented to the justices, including, once again, as you indicated in a previous broadcast, we talked a lot about the fact that this came from a trial court initially. There was a trial on whether or not there was an insurrection, whether Donald Trump was involved. The trial court judge finds an insurrection. Curiously, she finds that Donald Trump is not subject as an official of the government to be removed. That is overturned by the Colorado Supreme Court. They go in for the entire argument here. That's one of the things that the Supreme Court can take a look at. My sense is, once again, among the various things you're going to hear, this is not insurrection, maybe not covered as an official act. There might be some due process arguments to be made. There's this other question about whether or not the 14th Amendment is self-effectuating, self-enforcing. Do you need a conviction? Do you need a prior criminal conviction to be removed? What about a legislative act? Is the legislature, are they the only ones who can do this? All kinds of things that the Supreme Court can embrace and talk about tomorrow. My prediction, again, prove me wrong. I very well could be wrong about this, but they probably will embrace something called the political question doctrine. They've done this before when it comes to partisan gerrymandering. So you know what? As a federal court, we shouldn't be involved, perhaps very much pursuant to what Judge Gorsuch said when he was on the 10th Circuit. This is a matter for the states. Federal government should not be involved in a political matter. Federal courts shouldn't be involved in political matters, and therefore we're just going to punt. We're not going to decide this. We're going to let the lower court stand. That's a possibility too, going in the opposite
Jim,
direction.
that would create a patchwork of differing eligibility, because differing states have differing interpretations of whether or not Trump, A, is an insurrectionist, or B, should be ineligible because of the 14th Amendment, Section 3 is referenced. But Jim, this cannot be just a Colorado, you figure it out, because everyone's trying to figure it out through their own state's prisms.
That's exactly right. And we know already that Maine, the state of Maine, is out there. Remember the Secretary of State? She was the one who also tossed Donald Trump off the ballot. A high court there in that state said, you know what? We're not overturning the Secretary of State's decision, but what we're going to do is going to wait to see what the Supreme Court does on Colorado, and then we're going to come back and revisit this. If indeed the Supreme Court does permit the Colorado position to stand and he is thrown off the ballot, then you've got Maine, you've got many other, I think by my count, somewhere around 30 states, various stages of reviewing this, and you could have that patchwork. That may also be argued tomorrow morning, and that may also be a very compelling argument for justices on all sides of the political aisle to say, you know what, we want to have some consistency in national elections, even though they're conducted by states and state clerks and county clerks and local clerks around the country. That could also be a very attractive sort of non-legal response to this. We simply have to have consistency across the board. We don't want to have this patchwork out there. And for that reason, we are going to overturn Colorado, say he's got to be on the ballot. We've got then a straightforward vote across the nation. Every single state has Donald Trump's name on its ballot. They could do too. Lots of options here for them. And it'll be fascinating to listen to all the justices arguing about this, perhaps among themselves, also questioning plainly the attorneys for both sides tomorrow morning.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. That is James Santel. He's a former U.S. attorney and a host here at Civic Media. You can catch his show 9 to 11 on Saturdays. Jim, always a pleasure to talk to you, man.
Absolutely. Good to be with you.
The D.C. Appellate Court, this one came out. The absolute immunity denied 57-page beatdown of everything that the Trump attorneys threw against the wall was rejected. What's your sense on where this goes now? They put a deadline on for Donald Trump and his legal team to appeal to the Supreme Court by Monday, Jim. This seems pretty quick. What's your sense of the quality of the ruling, and how do you think the timing will go on this as we move forward?
The quality is great. And again, it's sad, as we've talked before, only that it took a whopping month to get this position out there. Plainly, they could have done something simpler. They plainly wanted to write something that's going to stand the test of time, not only immediately, if this thing does end up in the Supreme Court, which it should not, but also for history, right? They're writing as a part of our American history, and we'll be talking about this for decades, if not generations to come. And so some great language in there. Former President Trump lacked any lawful discretionary authority to defy criminal law
and he is answerable in court for his conduct. All sorts of phrases like that. But again, presidents are not kings, those kinds of things. We cannot accept Trump's claim that the president has unbounded authority to commit crimes that would neutralize the most fundamental check on executive power, the recognition and implementation of election results. Some great language there.
My understanding, he most bothered Trump, defendant Trump most bothered by them calling him Citizen Trump.
Yes, right. He is now a citizen, subject to, he can make all the defenses, offer all the defenses he wants to, just like anybody else as a defendant in a federal criminal trial, which is exactly where he is. And that language, again, it's unequivocal. All three of the judges came forth and said, nope, nothing here to see, and also discouraged in what's called in this en banc review by virtue of setting this very quick deadline to get to the Supreme Court. They're saying, you know what, we're not going to be calling all of our colleagues in to review this. This is not a close question. Indeed, they're right about that. This is not a close question, and it is upsetting, frankly, in history that we are still spending time discussing this. And that's the reason why a truly integrity-filled Supreme Court, if we have that, we'll see, should look at this and say, you know what, this lower court opinion is compelling. We're going to deny certiorari, which basically says, Donald Trump, thank you very much for your submission. We're not going to hear this case. The D.C. Circuit holds, and then this goes back to Tanya Chutkan for her trial.
Yeah, but Jim, what if they say, but we're the high court of the land. We should have the final say on this and want to take it up for posterity's sake. Let's say they're of the highest principles, but it will also create a delay, Jim.
Absolutely.
And they can effectively create immunity for this man, this sort of timed immunity by not taking this up, or by taking it up and not ruling on it in a timely fashion, Jim. They could, in essence, create the immunity and still rule against the immunity. Could they not?
Absolutely, right. They could issue an opinion in September or whenever they wanted, presumably by June or so, but even there, going to be too late before the election. And you're absolutely right. Let us suppose they put this on the regular docket. You'd like to think that what they do, if they decide to take this case, you'd like to think that what they would do is say, okay, we're going to expedite this. We want briefs in 10 days. We want a response in 5 days. We're going to have oral argument 5 days after that. They can do that if they want to. That would be a sign, maybe that they're interested in getting this expedited. The real horror show here would be if they put this on the regular docket and say, okay, file your brief on March 1, file a response on April 1. We'll entertain the oral argument in May. We'll issue a decision in June. Then they have done exactly, Mike, what you just described, which is grant him really procedural immunity by virtue of what they're doing.
But if they issue the decision in June, and presumably they don't need an off-ramp, Jim, if they don't take the case, right?
That's
but even
right.
if they issue
Absolutely.
the decision in June and say, okay, now Chutkan goes forward. I mean, that can still get done before the election, could it not?
It maybe so. Pretty close. She needs a couple of months to try this case. Needs to find the time to do that. Every passing day becomes less likely that Tanya Chutkan can get this done, get a conviction by a jury by the time that November rolls around.
You know, I'm going to ask you to make some prognostications. I'm in a gambling city right here in Las Vegas, Nevada. We got a fine guest. He is James Santel. Jim, I'm going to put you to the test.
Let's
on
do
the
it.
other side, counselor. I got to know what to bet down at the MGM Grand later. More Devil's Advocate, a special edition for the Love and Democracy Tour 2024. Thank you to our fine sponsor, Chad's Design Build. More come on the other side.
.7 FM, home of the John and Gordy Show.
Partner now with the greatest radio show ever and start getting a return on your investment immediately. The Devil's Advocates are a small business just like you, and like you, we can't afford advertising that offers no return. The Devil's Advocates listeners support our sponsors and the mission. Tell you when your messages are working and put cash in your register. So invest your ad dollars to reach our raving Madison and Dane County fans, or affordably reach the whole state, Chicago, Minneapolis, and our nationwide stream.
How long is Charles Franklin staying?
One segment.
One segment.
Special events at your location. Interview your staff for satisfied customers to lift your business. Contact us today, Crute at DARNWI.com. That's Crute at DARNWI.com.
Covering all the news that affects you with humor and a unique perspective. Mattinaire on Air with Jane Mattinaire. Weekdays 11 till noon on the talk you can't ignore. Mad Radio 92.7 WMDX and on the
the Devil's Advocates, because freedom.
We're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. James Santel, former U.S. attorney, friend of ours, hosted here on the Civic Media Network, Saturdays 9 to 11. Jim, thanks for sticking around. Just to kind of recap here quickly, Supreme Court of the United States hearing oral arguments tomorrow on whether or not Donald Trump can be eligible to be on the ballot. The D.C. Appeals Court this week turned Donald Trump away. You do not have absolute immunity. And, obviously there's some delays and lots of things in the air regarding the calendar. But what's still on the calendar, Jim, is March 25th. Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA case, the Stormy Daniels, the election interference case, that thing. Do you think that's going to be the first one out of the gates?
I think it's increasingly likely, right? As we are gathering here and talking about all this in early February, as we are doing here. And so what can happen is, of course, Alvin Bragg, this is being presided over by a judge there in the Manhattan Criminal Court. His name is Juan Merchan. And both Alvin Bragg and the judge there have said, if these other federal trials, you federal folks, if you can't get your act together, we'll slip in here and we'll get this tried. Bragg has said, I'll do it. The judge has said he's got a scheduling conference coming up very soon here as well. He's going to talk to the attorneys about that. I think it's entirely possible that in the history of our nation here in the next few weeks, that could be the first trial to go to trial, the criminal trial, that is. Also the first one indicted about a year or so ago. Not a small trial, but not the scope of the trial, the insurrection trial or the Mar-a-Lago case, those kinds of things. Certainly not the Georgia trial, which is very huge in its scope. The Alvin Bragg trial in Manhattan could, in fact, go. And it sounds like Alvin Bragg is ready to get his witnesses on the stand. You have to do some jury selection there as well. This is not a small trial, but it's not the kind of thing that Tanya Chutkan has got before her, where you've got probably weeks and weeks of litigation before her.
Jim, assuming Donald Trump is found guilty in this Manhattan DA trial, what's the worst that could happen to him?
Sure. So he gets convicted.
Jail. Go directly to jail.
Right. And so what happens is he'll get a pretrial report written. At some point, again, this calendar year, that will happen. That will happen sometime after. Let's assume that there's a conviction, say in March or even April or so. Then you'll get a sentencing long before November. It's not going to take all that much time after a conviction. And you'll have this judge entering a conviction, presumably based upon what he has seen, not only the New York guidelines, but also the evidence in this case, could in fact sentence Donald Trump to a term of imprisonment and maybe impose some fines as well. That will then certainly be taken up on appeal, where? To the New York Court of Appeals, and that will still be pending while the election is going on here in November. But a significant event, if indeed, for the first time in our history, a former president, is convicted of a crime, admittedly post-presidency, that's unprecedented. And as the polls say, maybe your next guest will talk more about this, that could have an impact upon people going to the polls and deciding whether or not Donald Trump should be their next president, having suffered even one criminal conviction in state court, in the criminal court in New York.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. That fine former U.S. attorney and soon-to-be polished broadcaster. Did you hear him teasing our soon-to-be fine guest, Charles Franklin? Marquette University Law School polling joins us next. Jim, couple of practical questions. Will the New York trial of Donald Trump, assuming it goes first, do you know if it'll be televised? And if so, could we play it on the radio?
Right. I haven't looked again at the rules there. We've seen an awful lot of sketches coming out of previous proceedings, which suggest to me that the judge has not permitted cameras in that courtroom up to this point. But we'll see about that. And remember also the other thing that's going on in New York, and anticipate this sometime soon. Again, not a criminal case. We're still waiting for Judge Arthur Engoron to issue his, what I think is going to be a $350 million civil judgment. That could come out also sometime very soon. He promised it in early February. All of these things happening right in the midst of the campaign going on. We'll see how all these judges handle these various civil and criminal cases.
Now, Engoron had promised us a ruling earlier than this, Jim, and somehow, apparently, the perjury, a new prosecution of one of the witnesses at trial, one of Trump's witnesses, apparently lied on the stand. And we're talking about the former CFO, Alan Weisselberg, I believe his name. Yep. And Engoron apparently wants to know what was said what crime was committed. But this could get really, really disastrous for Trump. I mean, this could affect negative inference. Hell, it goes far worse than that. If there's perjury, I won't throw the Latin at you, counselor, but my understanding is everything that Weisselberg said could suddenly be thrown out, negative inference, and Trump could be looking at a massive disengorgement, I thought the term was.
Right, exactly. Lots of things could make this even messier than it already is. And it is messy, undeniably. You've got this possibility being floated out there. Certainly the prosecutor looking at this, when you take the stand, you take this oath of commitment to tell the truth, right? And it's got to be something, as we talked before, perjury is a tough thing to show, but it appears, at least as with respect to Weisselberg, that he may have made some very clear statements about some of his understanding of the financial books there. And if you can show that at the time, not only is that wrong, but he knew in making those statements that those things were wrong, that could support a perjury prosecution. Again, not an easy thing to do. The judge looking at this, of course, because he is also concerned about his own judgment and his own entry of an order here, that could impact that as well. If indeed there is something and some reason to believe that even Donald Trump's witnesses are not credible, that can go into the factoring that the judge will be making here when it comes to entering this huge, presumably huge judgment coming up soon. Absolutely.
Jim, speaking of messy, the Fulton County case, the prosecutor sleeping with the investigator, whatever. I mean, all this thing came out. Now, Fani Willis, that they put their document in front of the judge, very long, and telling the judge there that this was not a relationship that they had prior to, et cetera, et cetera. Where does this one stand? How do you think this is going to play out?
Sure. So the judge has scheduled a hearing on this, which again I think is somewhat interesting for reasons that go back to my own sense of what judges can and cannot do. I regard this, as we've talked before, not an unimportant issue in the public domain. I understand that completely, but it cannot affect the legitimacy of the grand jury indictment against Donald Trump, this RICO indictment there. All of this, I don't want to say it's inside baseball. It has to do with personnel issues inside the DA's office, whether or she or other prosecutors have relationships or not. That doesn't impact the thing that's pending right now before the judge. He may take a look at this. My guess is he will say, thank you very much for bringing all this to my attention. I find that I have no jurisdiction over the personnel issues inside the DA's office. Take care of those, attend to those, but it's not going to affect the prosecution here. And I think that's the big takeaway. Even so, it's one of these things that, once again, the nation is looking at. Donald Trump's, at least one of the attorneys there, on behalf of one of the defendants, advocating for this as a reason to dismiss the case. There's really no connection between the two of them, as serious as this might be for an internal issue having to do with the DA's office there.
Jim, I'm here in Vegas. I'm looking for some bets. If you had a bet, will the U.S. Supreme Court give us an off-ramp from Trump?
They will find one of them, and they will basically permit permit him to be on the ballot. Yes, in Colorado. That's my prediction. Yes.
Damn it. Well, fine appearance anyways. Thanks for joining us. You're harshing my buzz here.
And one more, Jim. Will the U.S. Supreme Court take up the D.C. Court of Appeals immunity issue?
I believe in the integrity of the Supreme Court. I'm going to say no, but that's one that I'm not going to bet more than lunch on, because they could do anything here. I'd like to think my Supreme Court, in charge of the judiciary here, is not going to embrace that notion. Let this wonderful order stand and send this back for trial.
Thank you, James Intel. Tune in Saturday mornings for his fine show. Stick around. Charles Franklin, our next fine guest.
Thanks,
Marquette
Jim.
Poland.
Civic Media on Facebook, X, and Instagram.
Civic Media News, I'm Terry Bell. Here's what Wisconsin needs to know. Wisconsin lawmakers are considering letting prosecutors have more time to bring charges for serious crimes. For now, prosecutors have 1 year to bring an accused
Just
offender
listening
to
on
court.
some of what
And the
Charles
bill would
he's
extend that to
going to
3
be
years.
remote in, I
Supporters
assume,
say
right?
it can
Right.
take
Yeah.
longer than a year to
Okay,
match
good.
DNA evidence to a suspect. Opponents say the state should hire more crime lab workers to make the job faster. People starting new farms in Wisconsin are encouraged to consider leasing land instead of buying. Steve Okonik is with the University of Wisconsin Extension. He says leasing land is often easier for startups.
Especially if you're a new person coming into a neighborhood, it can be very difficult. It comes down to networking.
Nationwide, the number of new farmers with less than 5 years of
All the people
experience
getting
has gone up by
educations here as they walk
17%.
up and down states.
I'm Terry Bell, Civic Media News. Now here's what you need to know closer to home.
For WMDX News, I'm Nate Wuggehout. County officials are looking to make food waste composting more accessible thanks to a grant from the Federal Department of Agriculture. They announced Wednesday that they've received $400,000 to expand their compost and food waste reduction program. Dane County will focus on expanding community drop-off kiosks for people to bring their food waste. It will then be sent to Purple Cow Organics, who will then turn the food waste into compost, freeing up space in the Dane County landfill. Young patients at Unity Point.
Hello, Charles. Can you hear me there?
Yeah, I've got you great.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm not too loud in your ears or anything like that. Hello, hello. 1 2 1
Charles.
2.
Nope, I'm good. I've got my level set. I can hear you both. Hello.
Unity Point officials say that new technology allows.
Appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Your levels are looking good on my end.
Well, so far, yesterday was a whirlwind. They don't even have local news on until 11 o'clock here in Vegas. So effectively, I had to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning to see the none of these candidates double up on Nikki Haley last night. What an embarrassing display by her campaign.
No
and then I'm gonna go to the post caucus party at the Tropicana, the Trump event tomorrow night, and see how that goes. But I'm actually staring at the Sphere right now. It's sort of an odd thing that never existed when I've been to Vegas before. It's right outside my hotel window. It's enormous and very captivating.
Well, the pictures are amazing. I haven't been to Vegas in a long time, but those pictures really do make it a stunning thing.
I'm like on the 19th floor of the MGM Grand Tower, the Signature. And I'm staring back at the Strip in the mountains, and the Sphere is out like where I got MSNBC on the TV, and I'm looking over the top of the TV at the Sphere. It's just filling up the window. But it's sort of weird because it's also like I didn't close the curtains on that window last night.
Oh,
and like I could see the Sphere lights through, sort of kept me awake a little bit last night. But I had enough rum in my belly, and yesterday was a travel day. I got up at 5:15 a.m. Central Time yesterday.
Oh
and
God!
Stayed up till about 3 Central Time yesterday. It was a long day.
Well, I tell you, it's tough being on the road.
I got my wife with me, so not so tough.
Okay, that helps.
Better than when Dom and I got a real nice, suite. And when Dom and I were here one time, I put him up at the circus. It smelled like a rock star's ashtray in that joint. It was horrible.
Bad times there.
Yeah, so we're spending about 10 times as much per evening as Dom and I did at the $32 a night circus.
But it's a little worth it.
Well,
30 seconds.
The Super Bowl is here this week too, so I'm going to walk over to the stadium next and check out how that's. I mean, there's a lot of media in town.
Yeah. Well, I was saying that you couldn't get flights into the airport next week or later this week, so
no,
you got in and are going to get out. Unless you have Super Bowl tickets. Did that come with the trip?
Right.
Warning, listening to the Devil's Advocates may expose you to opposing views.
Welcome back to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show, Wednesday edition, a happier happy hour. Thank you to our most recent guest, James Santel, fine former U.S. attorney, friend of ours. And now we're joined by another good friend. He is pollster extraordinaire, Charles Franklin, Marquette University Law School poll. Charles, I love when you come around with the new polling. Welcome to the Devil's Advocate, sir.
Hey, Charles.
Good new election year. Lots of polling still to come, but looking forward to talking about this one today.
At some point in the future, we're going to have you poll. Greatest radio show ever. But
I mean, it's obvious.
Why's
in the
ask?
In the meantime, we'll talk about the mundane politics. Top line here, the presidential race. I'm here in Las Vegas, in Nevada, because there was a quote-unquote presidential primary. There's something of a rigged caucus tomorrow night, but you have taken a snapshot of the Wisconsin voters. What do they think? Trump v. Biden, where do we stand?
49-49 with registered voters, 50 for Trump, 49 for Biden with likely voters. When we add in third-party votes, it stretches to a 3-point Trump lead, with the third parties taking a lot of the vote, 16% for Kennedy, 4 for Stein, and a couple for West. Those numbers will surely change over the course of the campaign, but I think it reflects the broad dissatisfaction with both Trump and Biden as the matchup. And so people unhappy with that are expressing it by saying at this point they'd vote third party.
Well, Charles, let's talk about Nikki Haley. I'm here in Las Vegas. In Nevada, Nikki Haley finished a distant second to none of these candidates in a primary where Donald Trump wasn't on the ballot. How did she poll with Wisconsinites on the current Marquette University poll?
Well, not a whole lot better. In fact, a little worse. She got 22% against Trump's 64% here for the primary matchup, but with about 15% undecided. Now, that's double what Haley got in November, so she has come up, but Trump has shot up from 38 in November to 64 now. So the consolidation in the party has gone on. It's just Trump has consolidated the support. Haley's consolidated the people in the Republican Party that don't like Donald Trump. She's getting 77% of the vote from people that don't like Trump in the party, but it just ain't big enough.
Charles, enthusiasm. Again, I guess we're not a year out anymore. We're, about 9 months out from the general election. But currently, there seems to be a real enthusiasm gap between those that say they support Donald Trump. They seem quite enthusiastic. And those that say, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, probably.
Yeah.
There's a gap, is there not, sir?
There's a huge gap there. With those voters who say they're very enthusiastic about voting, Trump has a huge lead over Biden. But for those that are somewhat enthusiastic, not very enthusiastic, not at all enthusiastic, Biden has a big lead with each of those three groups. So you really do see the sense that Trump supporters are really behind him. Biden supporters, I've got some reservations. I'm not that thrilled with the election. But despite those lack of enthusiasm, they're very heavily pro-Biden. So the question is going to be, as always, can you get those less enthusiastic voters to turn out? Biden's got to have them despite their reservations or lack of enthusiasm. If this just were to come down to the folks most fired up right now, it'd be Trump in a walk. But the less enthusiastic folks like Biden quite a bit. They're just not thrilled with him.
Folks are listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Charles Franklin, director of the Marquette University Law School poll. Charles, always a pleasure. I noticed in your poll here, the reluctant voters. What does that mean, and what does it tell us?
It means for us, people who, when we initially ask who do you want to vote for president, say, none of the above. I might not vote. Maybe I'd vote third party. That's about 12% in this sample, which isn't huge. But on the other hand, it shows you that if the race is tied, but really 12% are kind of up for grabs, that could move things around. Now, those initially undecided in this month's poll are splitting kind of evenly when we push them and say, if you had to choose, who would you pick? So there's not a lot of lopsidedness among the undecideds. They're kind of evenly split. The other thing is 18% say they have an unfavorable view of both Biden and of Trump. And so we want to watch that number over the course of the year and see if people ultimately decide they actually do like one of these people, or if that doesn't happen, What happens to the votes of those people that dislike both? That's a recipe for these third-party candidates to potentially do better than normal. In Wisconsin, in 2020, we had less than 3% vote third party. But in 2016, it was almost 6% that voted third party, and of course, a very close race that Trump won. So I do think there's a question of how strong the third party vote can be this time. Given the unhappiness with the two leading contenders, you'd think it'd be pretty big.
Charles, the economy, always a big topic during election time. The national economy, the Wisconsin economy, jobs reports from last month revised up 100,000. Currently, we're looking at 350,000. Inflation seems to be down. I think some folks are feeling like it's getting better, the numbers, but it's not really resonating perhaps down to the voters yet. What did you find on the national and Wisconsin level?
Well, for the first time in a while, we actually saw views of the economy pick up by about 10 points better this month than it was in November. That matches the national polling that has shown increases. And in one closely watched measure of the economy, they had their biggest uptick since the 1990s in their December poll. Now, here's the fly in the ointment. It is steadily up since 18 months ago in June of 2022, but it's still well below where it was in late 2019 before the pandemic. And so while it's moving in the right direction, public opinion about the economy remains well below where it was. Now, you cite the economic statistics, and we are seeing that begin to filter through to people. Also in Wisconsin, views of the Wisconsin economy are quite a bit better than views of the national economy. About half as many say Wisconsin is doing poorly compared to the national. And even among Republicans who are quite negative about the national economy, they're negative, but they're half as negative in Wisconsin's economy. So here at home, things look better than when we cast our gaze on the country as a whole.
Well, the economy might be the economy stupid, as James Carville once said, but the age of the incumbent is certainly an issue. And I don't like doing math on the radio, but up to 83% of voters expressed some concern with Joe Biden's age. They didn't have the same concern, at least not to the same percentages, about Donald Trump's age. And they're nearly the same age. But please tell us what the electorate thought.
4 years of age doesn't seem like it should be that big a difference. I tend to focus on the ones that say is too old to be president describes Biden very well. That's up to 65% in this poll. That's up from 55% before. It's an enduring issue, and he's not going to get any younger. Right. The only way to make that issue go away is to prove that you can campaign vigorously and effectively, and to get voters to quit thinking about that personal characteristic and look at Donald Trump's personal characteristic, where 49% say he's behaved corruptly, 53% say he committed a crime or did illegal things between the election and January 6th. So I really think the picture here is Biden has this big weakness on his age. Trump has a big weakness on the corruption side. And the area that I'm looking for the campaign to matter and change these poll numbers is only 17 or 18% say Biden has a strong record of accomplishment as president. 35% say Trump had a strong record of accomplishment. That's the kind of numbers that you would think the campaign will work really hard to change. And then we'll see whether that's effective or not over the coming 9 months.
Well, perception obviously becomes reality, at least in the polling numbers. Charles Franklin, our fine guest, Marquette University Law School poll. It's fresh off the presses today. And I've got to ask about my favorite senator from the state of Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin. She's on the ballot in 2024. It's her turn. And the Republicans, I'm not sure who they've got. I've heard Eric Hudvey. I've heard this other Scott Mayer, I think, businessman. And I've heard Dom's buddy, David A. Clark Jr. might jump into the race. What does your polling tell us about this fine matchup to be?
Mostly we're waiting for there actually to be a Republican candidate before we ask about a horse race between the two. But what we did ask was those 3 Republican maybe candidates and Tammy Baldwin on a favorable, unfavorable rating. Baldwin's just slightly underwater on that, 4 points more unfavorable than favorable. But Hovde and Scott Mayer in particular are over 80% who say they don't know who these people are. It's a little lower, but still 65% for David Clark. This is just why I don't try to poll until somebody's a declared candidate and running, because this is not unusual. These very high don't knows are true of almost every non-incumbent candidate when they first get in a race. But until they get in, and start campaigning and introducing themselves to voters, we really can't learn very much about how they're going to perform over the summer and fall. They've certainly got to introduce themselves. That's clear.
Although you didn't give me a preview of the numbers, you did give me a small insight. You told me after a couple of years, you guys were polling on the question of legalizing marijuana. Dom's favorite question. He asked of John Podesta in Vegas one time. But Charles, what is the current voter sentiment on legalizing recreational and medicinal marijuana?
Medical, it's huge. It's 7% in this poll, just gigantic. And 78% of Republicans favor legal marijuana. Now, we didn't ask about the details of the Republican proposal that they were talking about just in general. But when you go to just legalization straight up, not for medical purposes, it's 63% in favor. Republicans split dead evenly on that, but big majorities of independents and Democrats favor legalizing. That has been the case for several years now. 4 years ago, when we asked about medical, it was about the same level. So this is a case where the majority of public opinion is very clear, but the legislature's unwillingness to act on legislation for years now just prevents anything from happening.
Charles, while I'm thinking of it, today's issue is the biggest loser and the most unpopular politician in the state of Wisconsin, if I did the math properly, is on the ballot this fall. Hell, he might be on the ballot sooner if they clear up the recall they're threatening him with. Speaker Robin Vos. Am I true in saying he is the most unpopular Wisconsin politician you polled this time?
In this sample, yes. The thing with Vos is that, first of all, a lot of people don't know who he is statewide, which is just stunning, but there it is. And the people who do know he is, mostly Democrats. Republicans are less aware of their Speaker of the Assembly than Democrats are, and what Democrats think is not nice to Speaker Vos. Republicans are net positive, I should say, but just not aware of who he is, not able to venture an opinion. Notice the guy is elected by 1/99th of the state, one legislative district out of 99. So it's not surprising that folks outside of his district don't know who he is, but it is, from a public policy point of view and informed citizenry, really kind of disturbing.
Yes, indeed, Charles.
Charles Franklin, our fine guest, Marquette University Law School poll. Charles, always appreciate when you come down and go inside the numbers. When's the next time we're talking, Charles?
We're coming out with a national poll in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. And then the next state poll, if we still have a primary, we'll probably do one before the primary, but we'll see what developments come up in the Republican race to see if it's worth polling before the primary.
Charles Franklin, thank you so much. More Devil's Advocates.
Thanks, Charles.
Thanks.
Thanks again, Charles. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, man.
Do I have to stand by while this uploads?
No.
No, I don't think so. I think we should be okay.
Okay, very good.
Thanks.
Then I'm done. Have a good night. Enjoy the Vegas scene, baby.
I'm going to walk down to the site of the Super Bowl next. It's 12 minutes from my hotel and go take some selfies. I'm wearing the Packers colors. I'm going to go be an ass down there.
That's right. Good for you. Well, you can say you were there. Whether the day, that's not quite right. But, good enough.
I was here even if the Packers weren't. Thanks, Charles.
Right. Take care. Bye-bye.
The Devil's Advocates may not agree on much, but funny is funny.
And thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Thank you, Charles Franklin, director of the Marquette University Law School polling. The Robin Voss numbers really blow my mind. I mean, number one, how do most people polled not know who the leader of the assembly is? And number two,
especially Republicans.
To know Robin Voss is to dislike Robin Voss. He has a 17% favorable rating, a 39% unfavorable rating, and 43% haven't heard of him. And apparently most of those folks are Republicans.
Doesn't that just speak to the power of the Devil's Advocates radio show? Because we don't like Robin Voss, not one damn little bit. And we have been quite expressive in telling you, our fine audience, why you shouldn't like Robin Voss either. Some of a bully, this boss Voss. But I find it sort of redeeming, Dom, that we better educated our side to the malfeasance of Speaker Robin Voss than the right has in support of this. What he's the guy that appointed Janelle Branchen, the head of the crazy election committee, and she would bring in right-wing talk radio hosts as expert witnesses, but nobody else. And then she became a little too much when she charged the mound, meaning she brought a bunch of protesters down to Robin Voss's office. She got stripped of her assembly gavel, Dom. And he also hired the Gablemen. That was to live out this fantasy of the big lie, and did not show proper loyalty to the Cheeto Messiah, the cult leader, Trump. So Trump came to Waukesha County and stuck it in Rebecca Clayfish's ear and stuck it in Robin Voss's ear. And, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy, Robin Voss. The fact that he didn't lose the primary last time, we're gonna make that a reality this time.
Now they're trying to, the own side, the mega Republicans are trying to recall him. But I think Charles also was a little stunned by the lack of knowledge of folks about Robin Voss. We were both like, really? 43% don't know enough about him, haven't heard enough. And I think that goes to the general awareness. And I know, granted, we do this every day. We live and breathe and eat this stuff. But come on, people. I mean, hey, you know what? Know who your legislators are and know who the leadership is, because those are the ones that are setting the table. 844-967-2789. Let's get
maybe a redistricting would reset the table, but I will remind our audience that Robin Voss will be on a primary ballot. I strongly suspect that Adam Steen will run against him. And here's the good news. If there is no competitive primary on the Republican side, it'll be all the MAGA supportive going out there to vote for Trump, right?
Right.
And in that district, in the Pleasant Prairie area, well, he almost lost the last time in the primary, 320 votes. Well, here's what I would say, Dom. Our fine audience members listening on WRJN 1400 AM, or maybe on the big WAUK, the Beast of the East, well, if they live in Robin Voss's district, there's no good reason not to go participate in the partisan primary, because Joe Biden's got this, right? Joe Biden's got this. You can't cross over, can't vote for Biden, and then vote for Robin Voss's Republican opponent. But you could take Voss out this summer. August, he'd be on the ballot. That's actually not the same time as the presidential primaries, I think, allowed. So this little scheme, we'll have to execute that later in the summer.
844
beat Voss in the primary, I say. This time is the last time.
We'll get a flow chart for you, folks. Let's get to the lines. Wisco Paul, you're up. Welcome, Paulie. What do you got?
Hey, Devils. Good afternoon or evening now. It's getting dark. Hey,
it's bright and sunny here in Vegas. I'm 2 hours behind you, Paul.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. You lucky guy. Hey, I can call you a lucky devil. Man, that's awesome. I forgot about that. Hey, yesterday proved that Trump has total control of the GOP. Like, you just call up Senator Johnson and you go, hey, let's kill our own border bill. Okay, Donald, we'll kill our own bill, you know.
Yep. Well, if you're talking about Ron Johnson, Ron always wanted that border deal dead. He was the biggest obstructionist. You're talking about Speaker MAGA Mike Johnson, probably, over on the House side.
Yeah, both of them, actually. Yeah, I meant the Speaker. But they killed their own bill. It's just a crazy thing. Hey, I always trust the Marquette polls pretty good because they are hardly never wrong. I don't know what Charles does, but he pretty much gets it right. But one would think,
except that whole Hillary thing. But please continue, Paul.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. I've been corrected twice today already. You would think Biden would be up by 10. It's troubling, even 5 to 10, because Trump has so much baggage. It's like, I can't believe this guy is even, but that's very troubling news to me. And I certainly don't want a Trump presidency. I don't know what people are looking at. Maybe it's because Biden, he does look old, but Trump looks just as old, if not older. I mean, it's
Paulie, 83% of the polled Wisconsinites expressed at least modest concern with Biden's age. This is not a Crute bringing it up because he wants to rub it in. No.
I mean, the facts
There's
are the
an
facts.
age issue and there is an enthusiasm gap. And that's very concerning to me because as much as I like to hammer on all the legal problems of Donald Trump and assume that at some point it's going to catch up to him, it's going to weigh him down, be it the civil suits, the financial foreclosures, the criminal stuff. I figure at some point it's going to catch up to the man. But when you look at all the polling, the enthusiasm, even in the state of Wisconsin, the enthusiastic are voting for Trump. I hope I make it to November. I hope I live that long sort of, those voters are firmly in the Biden column. And it's our job, Dominic, to make them more excited.
You know what? I'm not even worried about them being excited. Just go pull the trigger, pull the lever for Joe Biden, man. He could be the Weekend at Bernie's candidate, and I'm still voting for him over the fascist orange guy. Don from Milwaukee, you're up. Welcome, Don. What do you got?
Hey, Don.
Yeah, good afternoon, Devils. Yeah, you guys are making such a big deal out of the age. Well, I just read a couple of days ago that there's a guy in Iowa, this Grassley. He just filed nomination papers. He's 90 years old. He's going to be 100 years old by the time he gets done. So what's the big deal about this age crap?
Nah, not for me, Don. I get you. I'll vote for Biden no matter the age, especially considering the alternative. But this is what other folks, this is what these are polling, man. This is what people think.
Folks, we are the Devil's Advocates for the Love of Democracy Tour 2024. It rolls on tomorrow. I'm still in Vegas. I'm not leaving till Saturday, Dom. So I'll be doing live radio all week long. Thank you for tuning in. Tomorrow, we got a Red Caucus. And then I'm going to a Trump event. And then I'll tell you about it on the radio. That's what we do here. Stick around. Something's coming on next.